Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is I wish I knew that there was a word for it, because that kind of, it legitimizes a lot, because my frame of reference didn't have any idea of what asexuality was. So when I was thinking about what I'm like and things that I do, I had this idea of like, what am I? I am straight, but there's this thing wrong, or straight but different, or straight but wrong, or there is a lot of fear there, particularly for asexuality, because lack of sexual attraction is often talked about as like a symptom of depression or like other kind of mental health issues.
Yeah.
So it's often seen under that kind of medical banner and not as an identity in itself, and that can be difficult because you're like, okay, it's like you're going into the conversation a lot of the time where your exposure to this thing has been like, this is a negative thing.
Well, Dean, it's great. Well, I've seen your face a bunch of times, mainly, but it's great to finally see your face when it's talking to me. That's a very weird intro, but I'm going to roll with it. How are you doing?
I'm honoured. I'm absolutely honoured.
How's it going today?
Yeah, grand. Yeah, I will admit I'm not a morning person a lot, so it's I might come across a bit weary and tired.
I just come across a bit weary and tired because I am weary and tired, and we've got a lovely siren going right past my house right now.
Let's go.
It's like there's too much awesomeness on one screen. We must shut it down. So, give us a little kind of bullet point intro to who you are.
Well, I'm Dean.
And what you do, I suppose, as well.
Sure, yeah. My online presence, I'm a part of TH It Up Gaming, which is a project that I started with DJ Sweaty Jocks there. We just saw this, actually, Jesus Christ, I'm feeling old. It's about like 11 years ago now. We saw that, the likes of CNanners and Hutch were doing video game stuff, and we were like, we could do that. So we busted out a capture card that we paid far too much for, and a Disney SingStar microphone, a USB microphone that we worked off of.
Okay.
We just kept it rolling. Outside of that, I am primarily a teacher. I teach in secondary school over here, so like second level education. In America, I suppose it's whatever the equivalent is between like 13 and 18. I know there's a bit like, it's kind of middle school, high school crossover there. So I teach music and religion, which again might sound scary. Religion is not overseas. It's not a big school subject, so it might sound a bit shocking.
Yeah, which is one of the other things I do kind of want to get into today. So one of the reasons, obviously, I wanted the prime focus, but not the only focus to be today. And this is, we totally and utterly planned this, or Asexual or Ace Awareness Week was planned around us, or one or the other. I'm not quite sure which way around it was. It's total coincidence, and I'm blagging it. But is that you are asexual? Could you explain to anybody what that means?
Sure, yeah. As when explaining sexuality in 2021, there's a lot of spectrum kind of stuff that goes on, which can be a bit overwhelming.
Yep.
Asexuality just covers a spectrum of sexuality where you experience little to no sexual attraction. That is not to say that asexual people don't engage in relationships. Some of them don't. Some people don't, which again gets kind of difficult to explain. The easiest way to explain it is asexuals. We like to use something called the split attraction model, where for a lot of people, their sexual attraction and their romantic attraction would line up. So the people that they're sexually attracted to are the same as the people they're romantically attracted to. With asexuality, we kind of separate those. So if I was to give my full sexual identity, it would be I am asexual and heteroromantic. So I would be romantically attracted to people of the opposite sex, or opposite genders, I suppose. And asexual, I do not experience sexual attraction.
Okay. So how, I mean, obviously you're probably sick of this question because I imagine this is the first one anyone asks is how did you discover that? What was that whole process like? Because obviously you're, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 26.
Okay. So you're, like sexuality is obviously being spoken about a hell of a lot more now. And I think, but even then, this particular topic doesn't get as much attention as it probably needs. It is, am I right in saying that in the LGBTQIA2 plus, this is the A? Asexual is for that. Yeah. So what was that kind of like? Because obviously, I mean, you've been brought up in Ireland. It's Ireland is known for being a somewhat traditional country. It's, Irish people don't have other sexualities, So, for what was that whole kind of process like for you growing up?
Well, you see, like that's the interesting thing. Like, I hadn't heard the word, and this is why, like, it's so important to share the information, because, like, I just known that I was kind of different, when people my age were talking about, girls that they liked or things that they liked about, other people. Some of it wasn't really clicking for me. I wasn't really, I logically I understood what they were saying, but I was like, oh, and that's something that occurs to you. That's strange. So there was a lot of, like, as with anybody who has something about them that is different, there was a lot of masking that goes on. And then it wasn't until I was in, like, my second year of college, so I would have been 20, 21. I just happened to be on Tumblr. I had gotten into Tumblr at the time, so I was looking, and somebody else said that they had said biromantic asexual, and I was like, I don't actually know what that means. So I, a bit of Googling, and I was like, oh, okay. And then it kind of was solidified, because I shared some kinship with that, but I was like, okay, well, that's fair enough. Yeah, I can understand that. And then, as college lunch times get, we were all kind of sitting around and just joking around, and people were taking the Kinsey test for, just to pass the time. The Kinsey test is that it's like a sexuality spectrum, and you answer some questions, and it'll tell you kind of whereabouts you fall on it. And people were getting, it would have, like, homosexual on one side, heterosexual on the other, and it would show you where on a slider you were, with the middle being bisexual. And then I had answered all my questions, and it gave me, like, an X, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, I guess that's what it is then. So it wasn't
when
until
you did
I was, like,
that,
21.
were the other people was everybody kind of watching each other's results and stuff?
Yeah. So we were doing it as, like, you'd take the test, you'd see your answer, and you'd be like, yeah, I guess, that makes sense. Yeah. And then mine came up, and I was like, yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. And some people, obviously, like, nobody had seen somebody get an X on the Kinsey scale. And then there were other people who were more, in tune with the current sexuality conversation than I was. And they were like, oh, yeah, so asexuality. Yeah. And I was a bit like, you knew what this thing was, and you didn't tell me? Or
Well, I mean, I suppose it's like this is the kind of the historic issue, is that these things are not spoken of.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always, like you said, there's masking involved as well. And it's like, there's always that when it comes to some of the more well publicized sexualities, for want of a better word, actually, I suppose well represented, I guess, would be the better kind of phrase for it. Even then, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear of, and this was kind of obviously 5 or 6 years ago that this happened. It's like there's a lot of fear of, what if people find out? It's one of the things that I think why sometimes people refer to kind of closeted mental health issues sometimes, is because that same question of what are people going to think when they find out, is still very prevalent there. So, as I know, for example, the first time I ever met an openly asexual person was about 3 years ago, and then within about 2 weeks met somebody else who was as well, and but not openly. So she was closeted, and I would like at the time it was like, oh. I was like, you two should talk. And it was like, well, no, I'm actually not ready for anyone to find out this about, this. I'm not ready for anybody to find out this about me yet. And it's like, it is that whole period where you think that the world's becoming, like, more, and the world is becoming more and more progressive, but still everybody has to come to, everybody has to kind of like come to that point on their own time, I guess.
Yeah. And like another thing, like there is a lot of fear there, particularly for asexuality, because lack of sexual attraction is often talked about as like a symptom of, depression or like other kind of mental health issues.
Yeah.
So it's often seen under that kind of medical banner and not as an identity in itself. And that can be difficult because you're like, okay, it's like you're going into the conversation a lot of the time where your exposure to this thing has been like, this is a negative thing,
Yeah. I mean, it's I suppose it's again with I guess levels of sexual attraction, that in itself is a spectrum, and obviously, and especially when it comes to things not just sexual attraction but sex drive, that can be kind of like such an issue. I mean, with bipolar disorder, which I have, there's a annoyingly high one that comes with it when it does, and then not when it doesn't, which is now getting much easier as I get towards 40. And but that was an absolute freaking pain in the arse. But it made me feel like there was something wrong with me because I was overly sexual. And then obviously, I've met people that have, not people who identify as asexual, but people who would openly say that they have actually a very low sex drive themselves, and they have very little interest in sex, but do have a lot of interest in companionship. It's and it's this idea like about like right or wrong, which like I don't even know why we still talk about it. It's like okay, who's right in this situation? If you let's say you partner two people, one person with an obscenely high sex drive and one person who is like either low sex drive or asexual, it's like there's this desire for people to go, well, who's right or who's wrong in this situation? And it's just like, no, they're probably just not right for each other. It's like, it's about rhythms that work together, or like, but yeah, it's like, I suppose when people say like that, they want to kind of attribute things to often being whether they are attached to mental health conditions or not. As my high sex drive was always attributed towards the fact that I have bipolar disorder, and that's just a thing. Adding a little bit of kind of ADHD and fixation on top of there, and it was a recipe for disaster at times.
I think humanity is a recipe for disaster the best of times. So we're doing well.
Oh, absolutely. So how did once you'd had that number, that X, should I say, on the scale come out, and you said that made sense for you, like kind of, was this is this something that you've kind of had to come out with friends and family? Like, is this something that you've had to explain? Like, is this because obviously life is full of those wonderful questions like, when are you getting married? Or like, when, is that something that you've had to deal with, that kind of?
Yeah. I think I've been, it's something I've tossed around a lot in my own head and just kind of come to terms with. Like, I think my situation is kind of, because I'm heteroromantic, saying that I am asexual doesn't change a lot of those expectations. I still am gearing towards, having a relationship and getting married and all that sort of fun stuff that comes down the line. And it's because of that hetero part of me, I still would, in shorthand, identify as straight a lot of the time. So in terms of coming out, like I kind of, and again, if you ask like the DJ, if he's still in the chat, like I'm a very private person at the best of times. So like I tend to, I'll bring it up if it's relevant to the conversation that's being had, but I never have like okay, let's pause everything and I'd just like to share this thing. It's just not, it's not the person that I am. So that is the big part of it there.
Is there anything like that you wish you'd known when you were younger, that like maybe for like younger people that might be like tossing this thought around, as you said, and right now are doing? Is there anything you wish you'd have known then?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is I wish I knew that there was a word for it, because that kind of, it legitimizes a lot, because my frame of reference didn't have any idea of what asexuality was. So when I was thinking about what I'm like and things that I do, I had this idea of like, what am I? I am straight, but there's this thing wrong, or straight but different, or straight but wrong, or but broken. Broken is the terminology that's used a lot when it comes to asexuality, So just knowing that there was a word for it would have been fucking life changing,
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of kind of like, you're talking about the idea of being, heteroromantic as well. It's like having relationships with that. Is it usually that in this situation have sexualities that match up? So that people who are heteroromantic but asexual would still look for a fellow heteroromantic but asexual partner?
It would be an ideal situation, but relationships are never really the perfect ideal, because the different asexual people would have different levels of comfortability with sexual activity. So we tend to identify it along a spectrum of like sex repulsed to sex favorable.
Okay.
So there are some people who like it's not what you do, it's what you like doing, that kind of way.
Yeah.
So there are people who they're asexual, they don't really want to engage in sexual activity, but they will still do it, and that doesn't invalidate the identity at all.
Yeah.
I don't
really want to watch the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but I will kind of.
Yeah.
What you'll do for your partner.
Sure. Yeah. And listen, like sometimes it's not even a sacrifice thing. I've talked to some people who have like, they don't experience the attraction, but the activity can be, they have parts that they enjoy about it. So, they can still engage in it, and, that doesn't invalidate it either. There's a lot of, because asexuality is the way it is, sometimes there's a lot of second guessing yourself with regards to like, if I do this thing, am I still asexual? If I engage in this thing, am I allowed to call myself? Which I will like applaud the asexual online community, where a lot of us are kind of like, listen, if you like the word, use the word. There's not a checklist you have to hit. Even if you want to change later on down the line that it didn't fit you anymore, that's perfectly fine as well.
Yeah.
It's one of those. There was that U.S. senator who they were talking about like banning porn, and he was like, I can't define porn, but I know it when I see it.
Yeah.
So it is like, it when you feel it,
I'm going to field a little question over that's come from Cass, actually, because I saw it in time, which is quite nice, and I think it fits right into this point of the conversation. How do you feel about the lack of or just terrible asexual representation? I imagine this means within entertainment media.
Yeah.
Says, I can think of one asexual character where it doesn't make a big deal. Todd Chavez from BoJack Horseman. I've noticed that asexual rep is just like robots and aliens. So I want to know, one, how do you feel about the current ace rep? And two, if you found any good representation?
Yeah, that's the big issue. Todd is kind of the one person that we can name offhand. That's the one we got. Even there's that Netflix show Sex Education, which is, it shows a lot of great stuff and it's great. But I think I haven't watched the show, but somebody told me like there is an asexual character and they get a grand total of like 4 minutes screen time, and then it's dealt with and it's put away. Yeah. And that character doesn't show up again. You get the likes of like Data in Star Trek, is the closest that we get. And, this asexuality is a symptom of his unhumanness. It can be seen as this, thing that can be fixed. Actually, fixing it does show up in an episode of House, the medical show. And it is like House is skeptical of it, and then he fixes it by the end of the episode. It's so you were actually, you had this disease that had your sex drive lowered, and now it's fixed.
Yeah, I was going to make a little joke at the very beginning of the stream because just before, about an hour ago, so right at the beginning of the stream, before we did the interview, we had a new follower called Big Sexy 20, and I thought, have you seen the asexual tag and you're coming in to see whether you can convert? But I'm like, no, this is a new follower, a genuine, could probably a completely genuine person, and I'm about to completely scare them off. If you're still here, Big Sexy, welcome on into the community, and know that I held back a joke on your behalf, which I've now said.
Look, I'm a sexy man myself. I like to think.
And I think I do kind of really applaud sex education. And yes, they have brought it. I think they brought in an asexual character. I think it was actually in the most recent season.
Okay.
And I think I would say with sex education, I'm probably going to say give it time to see whether they explore that a little bit further, because what sex education does in a wonderful way, and I'm kind of so glad that, even though it's kind of graphic in places, I'm so glad that my kids have got that show to watch, and Big Mouth, the cartoon, which is phenomenal. I'm so glad they've got those cartoons to watch that actually talk about sex in ways that they'd cringe their head off if I talked about it that way. I'm actually probably more prepared to have that conversation with them than they are, Yeah. But also like that, I talk about it in ways which our school systems didn't, and even their school systems that are more progressive than ours were can't. And the thing I think the absolute best thing about sex education is that they don't actually make a big deal about any sexuality, and that's actually where we want to get to eventually. Is we want to get to the point where all sexualities are normal, all sexualities are normalized, and as a result, it's like what they do is they go, here's not every, like there's a few that they've not got to yet, but it's like, here's every sexuality, here's a huge host of different gender identities, and we're going to throw all of this at you rather than being it one entire season. This most recent season did focus on non-binary quite a lot, so there was one that became more of a focal point than they've made with anything recently, anything in the other two seasons, I'd say, which is fine. But what they do is they just like, look, here's a whole bunch of sexualities, and by doing so, it actually makes every single one of them seem normal, because it doesn't kind of like try and like point any one person out as. In fact, by the time they get to season 4, probably there'll be a straight kid that's probably the weird person, because there's only one straight kid in the whole school. But I think sex ed does that really, really well. So I'm holding out hope that that's what they're going to continue to do. Is the representation in that show is I think is hopefully going to be.
Of course. Yeah, I didn't want to it's not I'm criticizing sex education for having the it's just it is a sad fact that we don't get a lot.
Yeah, and again, I would recommend people to check out Big Mouth as well. It's bloody hilarious as well. So it's it's good. Is there before we is there anything that you want to anything else that you want to add about asexuality before we move on to other stuff?
There's a couple of the questions that I usually get asked. A lot of people are interested in, do asexual people watch porn, that kind of stuff,
right?
And the answer for a lot of those similar questions is the same. It's because it's a spectrum. Some do, some don't.
Yeah.
Just to get that addressed,
Yeah. In terms of, obviously you mentioned before, like there's asexual, and then there's, but heteromantic. There's also obviously aromantic as well, which is not interested in others than that. Which is, so I suppose someone who is both asexual and aromantic is not interested in like a relationship of any description.
Yeah, and that's aromanticism is something that I'm not as up to date on, because I'm still figuring out my own thing. So I'll learn here and then I'll start moving outwards. But so there are a lot of people who like aromantic. I think has even less representation and it's less talked about, because if you think of the media we consume from like going back into history, a lack of any romantic attachment to anything was a villainous trait. It was this person is dead inside, so it is a big, there's a push for representation in a way that's not harmful,
Yeah, and that's we've talked about this on this well, probably not the podcast. I think it was just one of my random thoughts, because obviously we talk about villains. I think villains is an interesting one because I personally don't want them to ever say that, oh, we can't have a bipolar villain. You know, we can't have a villain with ADHD. We can't have a villain with anxiety. It's like, no, but it's again, it comes down to this idea of representation. And I think the best quote I've ever heard about this was nothing to do with sexuality or to do with neurodivergence. It was to do with race. And I really should remember this guy's name, but I'm going to be super racist just by saying it. It's the Asian guy from Space Force, and he was basically talking about that in the film Crazy Rich Asians. Instead of being the Asian guy in films, he got to be basically one of an practically entirely Asian cast, and as a result, you weren't confined to a stereotype. And that's kind of the issue when any sort of sexuality is represented as a villain. It's like or if any kind of mental illness or neurodivergence is represented as a villain, is like we then see it as, well, it's seen on its own in isolation as being extremely harmful to people who have that condition or have that sexuality or whatever it might be, or like in the situation of this, it's like if you've got one Asian person in the show, and this Asian person is, let's think of something that usually isn't stereotypically aligned with Asian people, is, I don't know, a gangster rapper. It's like, well, that seems like we're portraying it that all Asians are gangster rappers. But if you have an entire kind of like Asian cast, you can have an Asian gangster rapper. And then you can have someone that's attached to something more ridiculous and stereotypical, like you can have the Asian kung fu master. It's like but if you kind of only go down the route of using those stereotypes, it just continues to harm people.
No, absolutely, yeah. And like broadening the spectrum is like it's a step towards normalization of certain things. You know, yeah. I remember in college there was this module that we had. It was religion and gender. Mm-hmm. So I was looking at the ways that different genders would be represented in religious beliefs and stories. And one of the big things that my lecturer was going on about was that, I don't mean to say going on about as dismissive either. It's just, but like he was saying that like there is a massively damaging view of women in the Bible.
Yeah.
But not even in a they are lesser than. It's women are often put on a pedestal as like this, symbol of purity, and they're only capable of doing goodness, and they only ever have things done to them, like incredibly passive.
Right.
Well, and like the biggest step towards equality would be like the acknowledgement that women are perfectly capable of being the same flawed characters that males are represented as in these stories. I thought it was a very interesting take.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that segues us perfectly into religion. Today, everybody, we're talking about religion and sexuality. We may even throw some politics in there. If anyone's got anything more inflammatory they want to talk about, then please send suggestions on a postcard. What was the pull for you towards becoming a religious education teacher?
I feel terrible saying this. There was none. I wanted to study music, and the one of the courses that accepted me was a teaching course that was religion and music. So it just came packaged with the thing that I liked. Right. Now, as I started to study it and I started to understand how nuanced it was, and it was just this thing that I hadn't really thought about, growing up in Ireland, there is this like baseline Catholic world that you're a part of, and anything outside of that you don't really think about. Now, thankfully, it's changing, but I think in the time that I was growing up, it was the tail end of that like Catholic default, everything else different kind of way of doing it. So as I started to learn more about all these different things, it became something that I care very deeply about now. So but when you're asking about the draw to it, there was none. It was this package deal.
So do you teach religion and music as one lesson, or are you teach religion as one?
They're my two subjects.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say the way it's been conflated a couple of times, and I'm like, well, it could just be, hey, welcome on to ARIA music. given the fact, I just find this very, I mean, you said it's changing in Ireland now, but like as a religious education teacher in Ireland, is there a pressure to be overly Catholic or promote Catholicism, or is it kind of a separation of church and state? You teach religion as a, the poly-religion, well, not poly-religion, what's the word I'm looking for? Pantheon there.
Yeah. So virtue of the fact that I teach in like an inner city school, and, inner cities tend to be a bit more progressive than other places, just by nature of the fact that they are a melting pot in themselves. Mm-hmm. I do try to cover the non-Catholic things first and then bring it back, because for a lot of people, they're, in primary school, they've been taught Catholicism the whole way up. So, I like to cover the stuff that they haven't had yet, because also being in an inner city school, we don't know how long we have these kids for. It's sadly uncommon that they don't make it all the way to sixth year. So I try and cover as much as I can. Like this year with the first years, I began, and I have to catch myself, because sometimes I do, like, I treat Catholicism as an afterthought, which also isn't fair. But I went through, so I tried to cover Islam, Judaism, and Hinduism, Buddhism, and then Catholicism is like the afterthought. But I'll always start with those four and give basic thoughts on each, and then we'll move on to the Catholicism, because, a lot of the times the Catholicism stuff is stuff they already know for like the most part. And it's, as much as I like to say it's changing, there is a lot of still Catholic baseline thoughts. I'll get a lot of these questions that just betray that. Like, I remember there was kids that asked me like, so what are we? And I'm like, it's not really something that I can answer for you. I know you think that everybody in this room is the same thing, but I happen to know for a fact that we're all not. So, but yeah, I do try. I cover. I tend to start with Islam just because of the religious climate that is at the moment. I like to cover it as, here's an exposure to a thing that's being talked about a lot in a negative way. Let's cover this in a healthy way and give you like the proper perspective, so that when you see the negative perspective, you'll have a context for it and you'll be able to dismiss what's not entirely true.
Yeah. How well would you say that like the kids absorb that and are willing to kind of, is there any kind of, at that age, sort of, what you're talking about 11, 12, first year of high school?
12, 13 probably, yeah.
So a little bit older than it is over here. Is there already kind of a degree of prejudice there, or?
Usually, yeah, especially with Islam, there's the media talks about Islam in a certain way, and that tends to be the way that they have absorbed it, and that's the only introduction they've had to Islam, which is why I make a point to cover it as much as I can. Especially because, like, I hate those moments of, because like when I was in college, I was doing teaching placement, so I wouldn't have been there at the start of their education, but I'd be there for about 4 weeks usually around January, February. And like I've had those moments of, people be like, but aren't all Muslims terrorists? And I'm sitting there being like, there are Muslims in the room, like, where did this come from? So yeah. It is a sad fact. There is that kind of.
I think it's quite interesting with we talked about this on the show like probably about 6 or 8 months ago, and it was when the all cops are bastards or whatever it was thing came up, and I kind of like strongly opposed it, and I didn't necessarily oppose it just because I don't think there aren't bastard cops. I opposed it because the ideology of all X are Y. Like in pretty much, like I can't really. I probably could think of an example where all X are Y, and I'd agree with that. But I think it's a very dangerous place for anyone's mind to be, is when you think all X are Y, and it's the basis of practically every prejudice that we're currently fighting against came originally from an all X are Y. The Holocaust came from an all Jewish people are Y. It's like racism. and then slavery came from all black people are white.
Mm-hmm.
And I know, obviously, one of the arguments that is often thrown up when it comes to things like religion or profession is that the person has chosen that as opposed to their race and heritage, which they do not choose. But then I suppose a lot of times with even religion is that a lot of times, people haven't chosen that. Like, people have been brought up into that with absolutely no other choice. I imagine, again, I know Ireland's changed a lot now, but I mean, Liverpool was growing up in Liverpool in the 80s. Like, we were still very closely linked with Ireland back then, and we had because in our accent it's Catholic, so we lick cats, obviously, and then Protestant was always said as proddy dogs. But I had. The thing is, I had a Catholic mum and a Protestant dad, which was really code for atheist dad. But but basically, that was such a kind of normal form of the conversation that at my age, that when I started meeting like kids at even college level, when I met kids from Southport or from Manchester or whatever it might be, not even realize that wasn't a normal kind of thing to even talk about when you could, whether you're Catholic or Protestant or whatever outside of Liverpool. So I know I know to a degree what it's like being brought up in that, in where basically Catholicism is told to you as this is what you brought up in and this is what we do. My mum still won't eat meat on Good Friday. It's like she hasn't been to church in absolutely years. But
it is funny the things that linger even after like active participation has gone out the window.
Yeah.
The Good Friday is the big thing. There are people that like never go to church, have never gone to church. They'll actually like profess themselves to be atheist in a lot of conversations, and then it's like that hard wiring in your brain that when it comes around to Good Friday, you're like, oh well, like I'm not allowed to drink, I'm not allowed to eat meat on this day. It's weird that those are the things that stick around.
Yeah. When with so kind of what sort of changes in thought patterns do you see when with the kids that do make it through the whole thing? Do you see sort of like changes in the way they think about things as they get older?
Yeah, I think nowadays by the time they get to that age, that's 17, 18 age, it's a funny thing. I don't know if it's just because like our school is mixed now starting this year, but before I had only taught girls. So I don't know if it's just like it happens to be like inner city girls or whatever, but they're very ready to champion the cause for the oppressed, which is a fantastic tendency that people my age when I was going through school, that we didn't really have that, that wasn't a thing that we thought about. So when you start to talk about, the way that Muslims are treated in the media, or like the Jews and the Holocaust, and just all of the different like the bad things that are happening as a result of religious mistreatment, they'll get to 17, 18 and they'll be ready to be like, I am going to correct Islamophobia when I leave here. Whenever I see it, I am going to correct this kind of thing. And it's a great thing to see that they become more open-minded to different worldviews as they get older, in a way that I don't know if it's just, the class that I grew up in where we were all dickheads. But, it's not something that we were talking about when we were 17, 18,
Oh, in RE when we did it was just literally, it was because I was in a Catholic high school. It was like, you had no choice. And nobody wanted to do it. So I know that we did cover various different religions, but it wasn't, I did pretty much all of my own learning about other religions as an adult, because for that same reason is that I wanted to kind of, again, I wasn't exposed to anything outside of Catholicism or a bit of Protestant, a little bit of Church of England in Liverpool. It was, in the 80s, it was an extremely racially and culturally narrow place, and it was not. It's changed. It's changed a lot now, but yeah, it was something that it was very easy, I suppose, if you've been brought up on that, to see anything that is not that as being a threat or a danger, or
and like the thing we have to realize that's a point of view that was galvanized by the Troubles in Northern Ireland. England and Ireland are very, or England and the Republic of Ireland are very close to, a religious struggle that happened, and the after effect of that is, people who are close to that conflict. If you are Catholic, you are very strongly Catholic. It is important that you hold on to that identity. And if you're Protestant, the same thing. You're very strongly Protestant, and it's very important that everybody knows to be Protestant. And because of the conflict that happened, it galvanized that kind of defensiveness and offensiveness in a lot of ways.
Is that still like a very big deal in Ireland now? Because again, growing up, this was something that was, as you said, it was in the news all the time, all the time. There was when, especially again, 80s, 90s, and now it's not something that over here we hardly ever hear of.
Yeah, in Ireland, it's a big thing. A lot of people my age, a little bit younger, we'd know the Troubles and all of the stuff that happened. I do think, just by nature of a lot of the young people that we get into school, there isn't a great awareness of anything outside of their immediate vicinity. So that's kind of our job as educators, is to bring them into the loop. But I do think the echoes of the Troubles are still happening, and there is one of the, I don't mean to jump on an England is bad train, but
no, you've got to say all English people are bad, remember?
Oh, of course. Yes,
it's got to be an all X or Y, remember?
No room for nuance.
No, none of it. And I'm the worst.
But I do think England has had kind of a dismissive attitude towards it, towards Northern Ireland in general. I think, there's a lot of people, I remember in particular, like the Good Friday Agreement is a very important piece of history for Ireland. It's the agreement that, among other things, there will never be a hard border between Northern and the Republic of Ireland, and there will people who live in Northern Ireland can identify as Irish or English or both if they'd like. And that this is a thing that, like, a lot of British politicians are unaware of, and they haven't read it. Even though, Northern Ireland is part of the UK, it is under their jurisdiction. So I do think that kind of, and that probably is one of the reasons why religious struggle in Northern Ireland has, like, again, I don't want to use the word galvanized again. I used it a lot, but it has, strengthened that defensive,ness, because there is a certain amount of, they've been left to solve it themselves, from both sides,
Is the kind of what's the word I'm looking at? What's the word for devoutness? Is devoutness the word for devoutness?
Devoutness works.
How devout someone is. Is that, like, now is the kind of devoutness to the two separate religions still strong, or is it is that now these are the political ideals of what we've been fighting for? One side really wanting a kind of united Ireland and the other side not, or is it the other side wanting a united Ireland in the opposite direction?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's, religion is wrapped up in a conflict that is purely political. It isn't a religious conflict. It just happens to, there are people that are on one side of the political conflict that identify as one religion, and there are people on the other side that identify as another one. The Bible says very little about, Northern Ireland. It's not
very little.
It's very little.
There's a little bit in Revelation, and lo, the seventh trumpet was sounded, and Northern Ireland decided it was Paddy's Day.
I think they said St. Paul is from Belfast, I think. But yeah, so it's one of those things where it's, religion kind of complicates a conflict that had very little to do with it. As a religion teacher, I will pick up that. I'll stand on that soapbox.
Right. That's we actually did end up on politics. We've done every inflammatory topic in the whole world. Not quite, But let's move on to, well, this, I say what should be simpler first, shall we say? But in terms of kind of like streaming and the content and the presence that you want to put out into the world now, what is the aim there? Obviously, you said that you and DJ started quite a while back with it. Now, what is the kind of, what could people expect from TH Up Gaming?
We've always said from the very beginning that TH Up Gaming is for fun. As long as we're having a good time, that's hopefully other people like it too. But the making video, like we made like YouTube gaming videos, and now we're both on off streaming. I try and keep a schedule. I'm not great at it. And even if you look at the YouTube channel, there's like Al will sometimes rip the piss out of me because I did 2018. I did Dean plays Stardew Valley episode 1. And then episode 2 was 2019. It was like 2 years later. But it is like I very much like to tell other creators that, like, if you don't like doing something, stop doing it.
Yeah.
If you're making something and you realize it's causing you more stress than good, drop it. You are under no obligation to continue a thing, which is why our upload schedule is very, very spotty. It's, we will decide, I'd actually like to do this thing, and then we'll sit down and do it with no obligation of, we're going to continue it. We're going to make sure that this is uploaded every week. I've got videos sitting on my hard drive from like June that need to be edited. Obviously, it is difficult being a teacher as well and balancing that, time. But our goal and our mission statement is we're going to have a good time, and then whatever happens after that happens.
Yeah. Fair play. And every now and then, well, a music stream.
Every now and then, yeah. I'm trying to get something together for maybe Christmas time, because I had a lot of fun doing I did like an emo concert where I got dressed up. I had the fringe, I had the eyeliner.
So are you still doing the Have Your Say with you and DJ? Still doing that with Alan on a Wednesday?
Yeah, we're doing. It's been kind of paused for a little bit just because we're all at very busy times. But the intention is, once things come back to normal, that's an every Wednesday thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, TH Up Gaming is fun, enjoyable, and then Have You Say is, we're going to get into the most inflammatory topics on the face of the planet.
Yeah, I still have
with Alan trying to poke the bear pretty much most of the time as well.
Yeah, he'll do that on purpose as well. He'll often, if there's something that I'm very passionate about, he'll just kind of pinprick and let me rant, and then pinprick and let me rant.
Yeah, well, it's good. It's very interesting to watch. But he plays devil advocate very, very well in a way in the way that I probably couldn't, because I'd be like, shit, people are going to start thinking this is what I believe. It's like I'd have to go, warning, this is explicitly not what I believe. However, I want to know. I want to dig into it.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Is there anything else? You want to add before we jump over to questions from the chat? Is there anything else you want to
add? Not really. I think I've answered everything that came to mind anyway.
Yeah. Awesome sauce. Right, chat, if you've got any questions for Dean or for myself, please bang them in chat now. There was obviously the one from Cass earlier. There's been a lot of talk about the religion stuff, I think, in the chat. None of it is directly tied to me, but I will read I'll read the one that came from the first time chatter as well. So Messiah Aaron is this could get religious. You've got Messiah in your name. It's important to note that all men have a female type of soul and vice versa. This means gender only exists within the constraints of reproduction and societal needs. Most ancient shamans or similar persons of importance and faiths often were transvestites, either male or female, who believed if you were in tune with both your feminine and masculine self, you're living in perfect duality. I feel that was Messiah Aaron in the conversation that was on the first Have Your Say, because I feel that comment almost came up word for word in that first episode, but and we did, and that was spoken about a little bit as well. What are your thoughts on that?
No, yeah, like there's a lot of, now I won't quote anything because I don't want to misquote. I do believe the the Hebrew Bible, so Judaism, would talk about different gender identities, and they have different Hebrew words for them. And the key thing there is that there are more than two within Judaism. Now, whether that is one of the more radical ideas that certain like orthodoxy wouldn't address, I'm not too sure. I'm not overly familiar with the current cultural context of Judaism, but I do believe like certain religions will talk about the importance of having separate things. One of the big things that I love telling people is, there is this kind of, due to the media and due to like the exposure that we get, there's this idea that Islam mistreats women a lot. But having read parts of the Quran, I have it on my bedside locker, and I try and get through it. But I'm a terrible man for reading. I'll get like 2 chapters into a book and I'll start a different one. I've got like a pile of books that they all have bookmarks in them very early on. But Muhammad spoke a lot about the importance of women independence, to the point where there's a directive in the Quran that says it is very important that women, while having a bank account for taking care of the family, that obviously the wife and the husband should contribute to, it is important for women in that relationship to have a separate bank account for the things that they want. Which, to think about the cultural context that is in, that is an insanely progressive idea for the time.
Yeah.
And, it's just, there are a lot of things in there that are very, equality and independence that I think aren't talked about enough.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I talk about the idea of gender identity and stuff quite a bit, and especially because I have what a lot of people would describe as what people would describe as feminine qualities. I've always kind of just put that down to the fact that I was I put that down to the fact that I was raised by 2 women. I was raised by my mum and my nan. My dad wasn't around. My big brother wasn't really around either. So I didn't really have much of a strong male influence at home at all. However, I'm like apart from the fact that certain aspects of that were kind of mocked when I was younger, kind of sensitivity and crying and things like that, and and all the rest of it, then I'm glad of having those qualities, and I have, but it's taken me to come to a position of being an adult who's kind of secure in himself to be glad of those qualities. So, as younger, I might have kind of self-stigmatized quite a lot by being kind of like, why am I like this? Why can't I just man up? The irony being that Alan, the friend that we've just mentioned, by the way, his channel's called Just Man Up. But but he is taking back that phrase. But the thing about Alan, though, is that he basically, when he goes into any new area, everyone in his area kind of knows it. But when he came over here, he had to spend the first 20 minutes kind of explaining why the channel's called that. I'm so glad I don't have that difficulty. But because I couldn't be asked every single time. I know, and I understand what he's doing. I understand why he's doing it, which is why obviously I don't think twice about having him on the show because he's a great lad. But at the same time, it's God, I wouldn't want to have to, people well, what's your name all about? Well, my name's Dave. I do mindset. It's actually, what is that? That actually does lead me onto a question though. What? Because I called you hit up gaming or whatever for about 3 months before you corrected me. What's the name mean?
So DJ and I have had conversations about this. It's an inside joke that we had as kids, and we've always said, our intention is to never share what it means. But we have had the conversation of if we get to, we've set the goal far, far away. If the YouTube channel does happen to get to 100,000 subscribers, we will do a video explaining what it means.
Right. I'm going to go and set up 100,000 alts right now. I have the time. I do not.
I don't know, does anybody?
No, not really. Right. Well, yeah, welcome to Messiah Sharon, who's just followed as well. And thank you for that first message. It led to quite a nice little conversation there. There's a lot of other stuff that they've said. I'm going to say Messiah Aaron. Is it he, him? Is it because obviously Aaron's in the But yeah, is there any questions coming further down? Religion can be a good thing. It can be helpful for individuals as well as groups of people. However, the way it is used decides if it becomes not good. I agree on that. I'm more of a fan of faith than religion, and my one of my absolute best friends is he was a Baptist minister. He's now just, I guess, a Church of England minister. Baptist was I converted to baptism when I was about 18, and then essentially turned my back on the church because I was sick of Christians. But as a result, the concept of faith is something that that's always kind of stuck with me, and I do kind of like. I'm kind of agnostic, but kind of pro. Basically, if we imagine agnosticism as a scale, the same way we've talked about asexuality, I'm favourable to a higher power, but not quite decided on one. So I'm at the kind of more faith related end of agnosticism now. Mm-hmm. And yeah, he hates it when I have that conversation because I'm always like, look, I believe there probably is a God. I just believe that none of our definitions I believe all of the definitions we've had of it were made to serve whoever wrote them at the time. That's my standpoint on religion.
No, sure.
I.e., as you've said, like the within the Bible, the standpoint, like, a lot of it is kind of disempowering to women. And I think that was written by men who wanted to disempower women at the time. I don't know, Mormonism was probably written by someone who wanted to empower women to be one of 7 million wives. I'm just going to get boosted off the internet now, aren't I?
No, fire on. I love it.
Don't mention Scientology. I loved the South Park episode about Scientology where at the bottom it just said, "This is literally what Scientologists."
Oh yeah, listen.
We're not even taking it out of context.
Oh, 100%. Like I'm always very hesitant to pick apart certain faiths because that is not really a great conversation to be having. It doesn't really add to anything. But I will say I have I have a lot of difficulty giving respect to a faith where the founder of the faith said 2 years prior to its foundation, if you want to make money, start a religion.
Yeah.
I have a lot of difficulty looking past that to see the quote unquote genuine nature of it.
Do you, where do you, if you're happy to share any, where do your personal religious beliefs lie?
I was going to fire onto it. The way that I describe it is I'm Catholic on paper. Because within that, and I don't know if it's just a circumstance of having studied it and seeing so many different things, we call Christianity, Judaism, and Islam the Abrahamic faiths. So the roots of those three religions all come from very similar places. They all talk about the biblical figure Abraham as a sort of founder figure. So it is funny when people are like, certain types of Christians, I won't name names, certain types of Christians will be like, oh, Islam believes in the wrong God. Yeah. It's the same dude, and they acknowledge that it's the same dude. They just think kind of slightly different things about the dude. And even, I will say, linking back to our gender conversation, God does not use he, him pronouns. The idea of God, even within the Bible, is that God is agendered. Mm-hmm. Because both men and women.
Isn't he Alanis Morissette?
I believe so, very strongly. But yeah, so like I'd identify myself as Catholic on paper because while the framework is something that's been very helpful for me to think about what I want out of God and that kind of thing about it, I do cherry pick a lot of the Bible. Mm-hmm. I think to truly call oneself Christian outright, you'd have to believe everything in the Bible. I remember, I wish I could get it. I wrote this entire like exam question for college that was basically looking at a lot of the books of the Bible as purely allegory, and they are intended to teach a certain message. And the reason that there is not a clear sign of allegory in those stories is because they were written kind of 2nd century, 3rd century. The narrative tools that we have now, we didn't have then.
Yeah.
So like Kierkegaard, the philosopher, writes a lot about the bonding of Isaac, which loosely is the story of Abraham, where God speaks to Abraham and tells him that he has to bring his only son, Isaac, which, you know, part of the history of Abraham is that Abraham and his wife had a lot of difficulty having a child, and God gave them the child as a gift, as a sign of like, thank you for having faith. So God asked him to bring his only son up, Isaac, to the top of Mount Sinai. And when they're up there, God asks Abraham to kill Isaac as a sign of, you know, full 100% faith in God. And then just as Abraham is about to bring the knife down, God stops him and says, I just wanted to see that you had faith. Now, if we're to interpret that story purely literally, God comes off as a massive asshole.
God handed Abraham a gun with a blank shot in it. And
no, 100%. Like it feels like if you're to believe that as a thing that 100% happened, the only goal there is to give Abraham and Isaac irreparable trauma. And like, you know, it's not something that it doesn't meld well with the image of an all-loving God. So Kierkegaard tackles it as this thing that 100% happens. You know, it's the story of why faith is so important. Even if you do not understand in the moment, when God asks you to do something, you have to do it because God sees everything and has a master plan. You know, it's a great philosophical paper. You know, I understand with the context why he thinks what he does. I kind of picked it apart and said, you know, if we think of the narrative tools that we had in the 2nd century, if somebody was to sit down and it's like, okay, I need to write a story that will show people how important it is to have faith, I think it's believable to me that that's what they would come out with at the end. You know, using the figures that the Bible used to create this story of, you know, our heroes came up against a problem and faith was the MacGuffin that saved them. You know, I can understand that. That makes sense to me. But certain religious people would see that as a very blasphemous view. So I'd probably be excommunicated for having that type of thing.
Well, yeah. Yeah. I mean, no, I kind of like faith from the practical, what it does for people point of view. And I don't so much like it from the practical, what it gets people to do point of view. So like I'm probably being the ultimate cherry picker in this respect, saying I think basically, you know, you should have the benefits of faith. Well, you know, by the belief that there is a higher power out there and the belief that there is powers beyond you is very, very comforting and important to people who have trouble believing in themselves. And by people who have trouble believing in themselves, I mean 98% of the world's population. Yeah. And it was and the thing is, it's like I believe in myself now. I didn't when I was younger. I was the traditional person who had the, you know, quote unquote God-shaped hole. Like I needed that mythical father figure to replace the legitimate one that I didn't actually have. And it was very like, but the thing is, I was talking to the friend who is still a minister about this the other day, and the most stable. I was like, I don't even want to say this. I said to him, I don't want to say this to you because I know what you'll take from it. So, but the most stable my mental health was during those years that I basically, whenever I felt like I couldn't handle anything, I handed it over to God. And that was like when I was you know, stronger in my faith. That was what I did. I would hand it over to God, and it would basically. There's a song by a band, a Christian band called Reliant K, called "For the Moment I Feel Fake," and there's a bit in it that says, "I think I can't, but I think you can, I think you can." And basically, it's that I used to kind of listen to that song a lot and think like, because I constantly thought that I couldn't do things. And having that faith actually pulled me through some very, very difficult points in my life. And then obviously that faith also led to a lot of the bad stuff that happened in my life came through the church when I was in the middle of my 20s anyway, not when I was younger, but in my mid 20s. And basically I had an entire bunch of people turn their back on. Basically, the simple version of it is I was completely complicit in this, and so I'm not saying this happened to me. I had an affair with a girl that was in the worship band, and when I was in the worship band, and the way that the church treated her versus me was the kind of final straw for me in religion, because I was completely and utterly banished, completely and utterly thrown to one side, and told that I wasn't welcome there anymore and all the rest of it. She was told she couldn't lead worship music for 2 weeks. And then the reason that those 2 weeks was later is that it was the youth pastor's daughter's dedication, and they wanted this girl to do the music for that. The girl that was this is a very convoluted story. Was at the time a closeted lesbian, and is now happily living her life married with a woman out, and her family did actually accept her, and it ended up being a very happy story for both of us, going in completely separate directions, which was quite nice. But the way that the church treated me in that instance, and the previous church, the reason I was at that church from the previous one was that I had a fight with the drummer in the worship band, who was the drummer to my band as well at the time. Because I called him out with, ironically, 2 years previous, I called him out on cheating on his girlfriend. And again, because I was more new to the church, I was thrown out, and they said, we don't like the atmosphere between you two, so can you not come back? And I was just, and it's just like, wow, okay, this is lovely, amazing treatment. But since then, I occasionally give things up to a higher power, not knowing who or what that higher power is. And that sort of feeling of faith, or feeling of this is going, I know that I do not have the capacity to personally handle this right now. So I'm putting it out there and hoping, and having hope and faith that something out there does have the capacity to handle it. Still brings me comfort, even though I don't kind of directly pray or directly address any given deity.
Well, listen, thanks for sharing that story, first of all. I think as the host, it's not something that you often get told, but
well, I'm not supposed to share stories. I'm supposed to let you do them. No, please. But I think what might be helpful to you is at a certain point with my own faith journey, I realized that I liked a lot of the stuff in the Bible. Obviously not the stuff that's quoted very often, but I liked a lot of the loving everybody stuff in there. Oh yeah, I'm really big into do unto others as you would have do unto you. I think that's fantastic advice. That's really Absolutely. Stood up. And
then, as the golden rule, that it shows up in most, if not all, sacred texts. So, it is something that is so important. It's so integral to society working. Is that rule? A lot of my problems, growing up in Ireland, it's no secret that Catholicism has brought with it a lot of problems. But I started to realize that my problems with Catholicism was not the faith, it was the church. And those can be two different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
While the faith can be great, the church historically has given us very little but problems. Even going back as far as Crusades, historically there has been a very bad week of destruction from the church. So when I learned to separate my faith from the institution that says they share the faith, I was a lot more willing to describe myself as Catholic and use that word, because they don't own it, I do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the reasons I've got so much kind of respect for Judaism, because Judaism ultimately, I've got a very she's still a client, I guess, but she's my only personal training client now, and she calls herself my Jew mom. She's she's also a judge, but came to being a judge from being a lawyer, and she's like, I know it's a stereotype, but like that's why you find so many lawyers in Jewish lawyers is because we're actually, the whole purpose of the practice of faith there is to pick apart the text and to kind of interpret and it's not one dogmatic approach to, obviously, Orthodox is, but it's not one dogmatic approach to faith and one dogmatic approach to the text. It's down to your own kind of reinterpretation of it and stuff. And I've got a lot of time and a lot of respect for that, because the one thing I've wanted to for a long time, actually, but I've not made too many steps in actually making this happen, is I've wanted to speak to the leader of a church that is like that, of a Christian church that has essentially about that has basically made themselves accessible, made themselves diverse, made themselves accessible and attendable to people of different genders, to people of different sexualities. And I would love to kind of jump into kind of how they've personally done that, because I do still know people that obviously it's not been so well done, or it's not even, it's even the exact opposite. I don't actually know, thankfully, any people from like Westboro Baptist Church or anything, but but I think again, I think that those texts were written in a time where a certain narrative was wanted. A narrative is a big important word in all of this. Because narrative and truth aren't the same thing. Narrative, truth, and story are three separate things. This is the truth. This is the story we've built on top of it. This is the narrative that we want it to actually go along with. It's and I think just like in the idea of separating faith from religion, as you said, there are faith from a practice from specific, church. From church. Sorry, I think there's an importance for people to learn to separate like the narrative from the story, or the narrative, and especially the narrative from the truth. We've got a question here about, we're going back to asexuality, but saying, have you found a way to give explanations to adults that keeps them from questioning or doubting you? I'm so sick of hearing, well, maybe your partner just isn't the right person.
Listen, my heart goes out to you. It's something that I suppose like people of any non-hetero sexuality are going to have to put up with. The strength that you can take back there is you do not have to engage in a conversation that you feel you're not being listened for.
Yep.
If I was to share my asexuality with a person and then they begin to try and diagnose and correct, I can pull the eject cord in that conversation and say, I was looking to share a thing with you, not have it repaired by you. And I don't feel like this conversation is doing what I wanted to do, so I'm gonna stop.
Yeah, we talk about this when it comes to mental health. I mean, I am also not straight. I am queer. I've not brought that conversation up with my mum yet. I've had that conversation directly. Well, I had it on stream. I came out on stream about 8 months ago or so, and I had that conversation directly in real life with my two closest friends and my wife. And I feel like I don't need to kind of like fully explain it to everybody. And it's like, it's the same with like with when it comes to like my mental health and stuff. I came to the conclusion a long time ago that I need someone to understand it. I don't need everyone to understand it. Because the need for everyone to understand my mental health and my bipolar disorder, first of all, I'm still learning. Like, I don't understand what that means to me. It's the same with my sexuality. Like, there's about 5 different words for it, but that's the most politically correct version of it now is finsexual. It was gynosexual, which basically I'm attracted to femininity. And basically that can be regardless of gender. So, but I believe that it's now called finsexual, which again, I found out the name of my sexuality and then found out I was being transphobic by calling it that like 3 months later. I'm like, no, I'm not trans. How can I possibly transphobic? Because
but I'm like, that's the thing. Like, the language is changing every day.
but yeah, like trying to explain that to my mum is an interest. Again, it's a bridge I don't want to cross, and I don't feel a need to cross it yet.
Yeah.
Like, and my wife's main question was, does this mean that you want to be with other people? And like, I'm like, no, I'm monogamous, but this. So it's like, so it doesn't mean that I'm gonna go and be with a trans woman or go and be with a particularly feminine presenting man. It just means that that's what I'm attracted to, and that's that. But I'm like the same as before. I was attracted to other women as well. It didn't mean I was going to go off and be with other women. And so I'm monogamous but finsexual. But when it comes to mental health and stuff, like the thing that what you've said then, it's like you don't have to engage in any conversation that, like, if someone wants to try and drag you into that conversation or whatever, you can choose, you can choose with your boundaries. I like to think of it as like, is this person getting it? And if the person's persistently not getting it, then I don't waste my energy trying to help them get it, because that's even though it is a problem, it is a you problem in the way that you feel the effects of that problem. It is them that is having the problem to understand, but that might be down to ignorance, it might be down to willful ignorance, or it might just be down to an inability to get their head around it. So yeah, but in that situation, like, well, I'd just be firm with the person and say, no, look, this is how I understand it. I'm the one that's experiencing this. It's taken me time to come to terms with these feelings and to understand them, so I don't expect you to be able to.
Yeah, and like the funny thing is, sometimes like people may not realize how a conversation like that. I'm talking the person who isn't getting it, the questioning and the maybe it's this. Sometimes they don't realize how invalidating that is. So it can sometimes be worth it to bring up being like, this isn't a decision that I've made on a whim. This is something that I investigated and discovered about myself. Please stop invalidating that journey.
Yeah. It's like, again, and I know, like, I keep on like comparing apples and oranges here by talking about mental health, because we like the last thing we want to do is put. No, I mean, like, it's communication. Well, it's like for example, I've not got a formal diagnosis of ADHD. However, like, and that's down to a few things. One being the length of time it takes you to get one. Two being the fact that I haven't started that process. But I tried to start the process and got basically brushed to one side by a doctor, and it took me a lot of energy and time to try to begin that process the first time. Yeah. So my inspiration to try and do it a second time. I'm thinking of, like, like when people say to me next year, what do you want for your 40th birthday? I'm going to be like, money towards getting privately assessed. Yeah. That's what I might get. But then I need a bunch of people that actually think it's important. And it's important to me. But as I've done several online tests, and I come out as strongly ADHD on a lot of them. I've done a few online tests for autism, and I come out as somewhere in the middle when it comes to the autistic spectrum. So there are autistic traits. That doesn't necessarily mean I have autism, and there are a strong number of ADHD traits. Like, I think it's like all but one, like, which is the same as with bipolar. As I didn't have the excess spending that is often associated with bipolar, but the main thing is that everyone, again, within the spectrum of mental health, each condition itself has a spectrum. Again, within the spectrum of autism, each person, there is a spectrum entirely within autism. There is a spectrum within, and autism is part of the spectrum that is neurodiversity, and so on and so forth. So it's I've forgotten how I got onto this, and there's the ADHD at work. But
no, sure. But yeah, like it's difficult to get certain diagnoses, but it's like it's for you,
Yeah. It was what you said. It was what you said about that you've done some time to research this, and it's not just something you're arriving at on a whim. And it's like, the thing is, and this almost proves the ADHD in itself is the H part of the ADHD is the hyperactivity or the hyperfixation is that once this once this was brought to light for me, I mean, I've hyperfixated on things my entire life. You know, I learned to play the piano on my own when I was 6. It's like,
Right.
and then stopped playing it, and then learned to play the guitar on my own when I was 15, and then stopped playing.
Can I ask, so when you stopped playing piano, did you have this sensation that it was an activity that was completed, like you had done it?
No.
No,
I don't think I've ever. This is but this comes down to, again, I think how we're socialized is the whole jack of all trades, master of none thing. I don't feel like I've completed anything. And a few years back, I had to kind of sit myself down about this, because I have played 3 friends down the aisle on piano. I have played 4 friends down the aisle on guitar. I have sung 5 people's weddings at part of the reception. You know, it's like, I may not have ever made it as a musician in the sense that I wanted to. At the age of 6, I wanted to be a musician on a stage, which somehow was brought on by watching the Tom Hanks film Big, with the playing on the piano and that wasn't on a stage, but I wanted to be on a stage from the age of 6. I've been on stage. Well, actually, I've been on stages as a museum. I'm a museum now.
Yes,
I self-identify as a museum, but yeah. So I have been on stage as a musician. In fact, the most people I've ever been on stage in front of is still as a musician. I've done 1,700 as a musician at one point. Wow. And the most I've done as doing mindset talks is 450. So not that I'm keeping score or anything, but yeah, so I have been on stage as a musician, but I'd never felt like it was finished. And I always felt like I was the type of person that would pick things up and then drop them. But I pick things up to a much higher standard than most people get to in years in a short space of time. Yeah. So like I've done the same with about 4 different languages. I can partially speak French, partially speak Russian, partially speak a bit of Cantonese. That's mostly gone now because I haven't touched that since I was 18. Mm-hmm. And the same, like, you know, basically last year I was all my overlays and everything completely designed by me. Don't have a clue about graphic design. I want to applaud you for that, just while it's there, because like I love everything about it. It's fantastic. my emojis and stuff, I've done all of my own emojis. I'm like, because I need it done like the second I need it done. So right, I got so fixated on Illustrator and Photoshop last year that I was so close to buying an artist tablet and all the rest of it and going down that route. And that's why Alona, I think last year for Christmas, she was buying me the Stream Deck and all the rest of the stuff for streaming. And she's like, is this just going to be another one of those things? And, you know, I've got 98% of an entire album recorded, but because I was the sound engineer as well as the musician on all of it, I can't finish it. Like it's never perfect enough. Whereas with other people's stuff, finished, no problem, because I had deadlines and like it's finished. And
I feel you there 100%. I understand exactly the struggle.
So like I've got so many things in my life that are unfinished, but at the same time, like I've learned to a degree how to be a videographer. I've learned to a degree how to be an editor. The You're Enough video of mine that a lot of people love, the music is entirely me. So like every instrument that's on that, the main guitar riff is me, the piano is me, all the other instruments except for the drums are sampled, and then the drums are live and are me. So, and I basically listened to the audio recording of me saying the poem and just played the piano along to it. And that's why that's why it moves with the words so well, because that was rather than spending it. So again, when it comes to doing my thumbnails and stuff, it's like on YouTube, it's all me. Now on each and every one of those things, I'm not the best in the world. However, there's not many people that can do all of those things to as much of a level that I can. They're not perfect. They're not, you know, if I had a team of 10 people, if I had a videographer doing the filming, which I will have soon, because that's what my son is training us. But if I had an editor doing the edits, they'd probably be a bit tighter and a little bit nicer. If I had someone else doing the thumbnails, they'd probably pop more. If I had someone write all my descriptions, I'd probably love that, because I hate writing descriptions. Yeah. But still, I can do all of these things to to a reasonable standard, and a standard that most people don't complain about, as well. Like, for example, I've again fixated on poetry for a little while, and that is the baseline of most of my videos. They are poems. And One Fallen Phoenix said at the beginning of the stream today, she was like, I've not heard a Dave poem I don't like. And it's like I'm no friggin', I don't even know decent poets, so I don't even know. Keats, was he one?
yeah.
But I'm not that. But at the same time, I've got enough of a way with words and enough of an understanding of emotion, and basically, I just write what would move me, and that's my principle. If I'm
that's the center of art as a concept, is it not? Just you're making the things for the emotion that you have, and that in itself is perfection.
Yeah. Oh, so Kayla's probably left now, but they say, I'm sad I have to leave. I've been enjoying this conversation so much. Oh. Cleggy says, I don't understand which bit. like this. I don't understand 80%. If I watch back what I was talking about, I'm like, what? Especially when I try and catch up with chat, I'm like, what are they responding to now? How is it possible to not have any? Oh, okay. Someone says, how is it possible to not have any attraction at all to other people? Well, I guess that's a question you get a hell of a lot.
Yeah, and there's a really interesting. I can't remember the word now, but there was a philosopher that talked about it is impossible for us to describe a feeling.
Yeah.
He put a word on it. Qualia, I think, is what he called it. Like, there are certain things that you cannot describe. Like, you can often, like, you have difficulty understanding the absence of a thing, but at the same time, if I was to ask somebody to describe to me, as if I do not know because I don't, what does sexual attraction feel like, words would fail them as well.
Yeah.
They can describe the things that happen as a result.
Yeah.
But describing the sensation itself is very difficult, if not impossible.
Yeah, it's why when we talk about empathy, it's like we can when we say we in fact, actually, let's go a different direction that other people like. That there's an expression I quite like, is that you don't love people or things, you love how things make you feel. You love how people make you feel. When you say we love a person, it's like we really love how they make us feel. Like it's yes, we love them about them, but it's what the thing about them makes us feel. So like the same as like how someone's laugh you might find super charming in the beginning of a relationship, and then towards the end it's like Janice from Friends, and it's like it's how you make. That's what people remember at the end of the day, is how you made them feel. If someone comes into one of my streams and I make them feel loved, if I make them feel welcome, they'll remember that. If I make them feel hurt or insulted, they'll remember that. They might not remember 6 months down the line what I was talking about, but they remember that's how it made them feel. They may remember the specific thing I've said to make them feel that way, but they might not remember half of what I've said the rest of the time that they were there. They remember. And I remember like learning about this once, which basically is like people remember how you make them feel. The two big times, and it's kind of like watching a movie, is the two big times is how you make them feel at the start and how you make them feel at the end. And we never know when the end of most relationships is. But yeah, it's like those are that's the kind of, if we were to do this as content creators, we want to make people feel amazing at the beginning of the stream, amazing at the end, and have a peak somewhere in the middle. The same as what most movies try and do. They try and give, like, let Disney do it the best. Let's face it, with Pixar, it's like they give you up and then they make you feel traumatized at the beginning of it, and then they give you a nice peak somewhere in it, and then they give you this nice little bit of closure at the end. But in terms of like, when you say how is it possible, that's the word I kind of where I kind of focused on, and I think it's in the same way that it's possible to be attracted to one gender, another gender, many genders. It's and the same way that it's possible in that. But the thing is, we can't, as you said, we can't analogize the absence of something. It's like if anyone tries to, if you say to someone think about not existing. And it's like, if we, because like, try and get your head around, like, if there's no afterlife, try and get your head around that. And I just basically go, it'll just be nothing and I won't be able to experience it. And so what will I know? And people go, well, you didn't exist before you were born. Yeah, but we don't remember that at all.
Tell me what that was like.
Exactly. I can't tell you what that was like, so I can't tell you what it's going to be like. It's not going to be like anything. Or even like when people say just think about nothing, you have to think about whether you're thinking about nothing. Yeah. So it's a bit of a paradox. So yeah, you are right. It is probably going to be something that, like, that's why today, it's like what a lot of it we've been talking about is kind of what's been your experience with that. What was that like for you in the closest approximation that you can get to what somebody else, like if I was trying to explain attraction to you, I would say, well, it's kind of like, on the Hanna-Barbera cartoons where like the heart goes blah, 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 and the eyes go, watch The Mask, but that's not. That's just. That to us is, that sums up how we feel. Like how a meme, some people will look at a meme and go, yeah, that sums up how I feel. And other people will be like, well, I don't get this meme. Whereas other people will look at it and it'll be the most relatable thing on the face of the planet.
That's the same. Relatability is the main thing. There's so many times I've been watching movies and like a character will make like a really stupid decision. And I'll be like, this feels like bad writing. Why are they doing this? And it's like, well, they want to get with that person. I'm like, and people do that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I'm only with my wife because I didn't realize until I was already several drinks in that I wanted to date her, because I can't talk to people that I want to be with. Like it turns me into like literally that guy, the person that's completely utterly dumbstruck and lost for words. And at first, because she's just like hyper aggressive and Eastern European microaggressions. If you're listening downstairs, Cots, but she's very blunt, and I'm Mr. Airy Fairy, work your way around it, find the right words, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But I'm also a cheeky little bastard. So when I was making jokes and stuff, and she, like when I first met her, she was just like shutting me down. And I just saw her as a challenge. Like I just thought, this person that's like being like all hostile towards me, I'm going to make them love me by the end of the day.
Yeah.
And then we're having a nice conversation like on this friend's birthday. And having this nice conversation because I'm laying on the charm thick because I'm, trying my best to overcome this challenge. And I'm about like, we'd been to like out for Mexican food with jugs of cocktails and all sorts by this point. So I'm about 6-7 drinks deep. And then I walked off to the toilet, went off to the bathroom, and I was just like, shit, I really like this girl. I want to ask her out. And I was like, and then my brain was like, it's a good job you're drunk, otherwise you'd go back out there and you wouldn't be able to talk, wouldn't you? And that's honestly, it's like, you're right. Our brains make us do things or stop us from doing things that otherwise we would be capable of because of attraction. And I can see how obviously if you're seeing that in films, you're just like, ugh, this is stupid. But I suppose it's the same as when someone who's never been addicted to something sees addiction in a film.
Yeah.
Like if they see addiction in the film, like, well, why don't they just stop? Or like, in fact, like the same as when someone who's never had an eating disorder speaks to someone who has and says, well, why don't you just eat more? Or why don't you just eat less? Because and it's like, and that's the way, that's it unless a person's kind of lived through something, they don't realize it. And that's why I constantly come back to the phrase, you are not weak, the journey is just difficult, that I use a lot. The important thing about that is it doesn't need to be difficult to me in order for me to accept that it's difficult to you, or in this case, rather than the word difficult, possible. It doesn't need to be impossible for me to have sexual attraction, to understand that, or maybe not to understand, but to accept the fact that you don't.
Mm-hmm. But it's funny because that's the thing. Like I think for the longest time historically, everybody has seen the world through the lens of their own experience. And now it's probably a culmination of a lot of things, there's more acceptance, there's more exposure. People are now being exposed to ways of life that don't match up with their experience. But because we have this, like a lot of us have grown up in a binary world, things were right, wrong, this way, that way. There wasn't, spectrum thinking, I think, is relatively new.
Yeah.
So, we tend to frame everything within that context. Even earlier on the conversation that we had about, when I was finding out things about being asexual, I had always framed it as this but wrong, or this but broken. And even, going to things like gender, we had seen it as it is this way or this way. And now the world is opening up and we're getting better. I will not say we're there, because we're not, but we're getting better at, acknowledging that I have never experienced this thing, but if this person is telling me that this thing is happening, then who am I to correct? It does make me hopeful that, give it a few years and this type of thinking will be baseline.
And that's or at least more well represented, and as a result, it's like when we talk about intrusive thoughts stick because they're not normal, or they're and as a result we see them as potentially dangerous. Often an intrusive thought is quite dangerous, because especially when it comes to things about wanting to hurt yourself or hurt other people, and we think that because we're having that thought, it sticks in our mind and makes us question who we even are as a person. And because it sticks there, like if you were to kind of like see a purple elephant walking down the street, that'd be the most memorable part of your day. If you were to, but if we were to like live in a sort of Ready Player One type world where we were all different avatars of all sorts of different things, not a lot would stick out, and not a lot would and that's the whole thing. I think that normalization, I don't think it's about everybody singing off the same hymn sheet at all, because I think that's a very unrealistic way of looking at things. I don't think there's so many things, like in terms of when it comes down to not understanding, that's something I have to stop myself, like on things that to me are completely and utterly like this is clear cut, like for example, I could even be misconstrued as being all of the ists in the whole world, because the way I simply see things is human rights are human rights. It's, there you go, you're a human, you've got rights, and we should all have the same ones. I oversimplify it, and that to me makes obscenely perfect sense. And it's like what was brain's done it again, but that to me it's like, how does not everybody see it that way? How are we even having some of these conversations? But then I also think how are some people having conversations in the entrance to Tesco's? It's like, how's that not common sense? Is my favorite way of saying it. Like the things that we consider common sense are just what's common sense to us.
No, 100%.
How we've been socialized, or how we've been educated, or whatever it might be. And so I don't think we're ever going to sing off the same hymn sheet, but it comes down to accepting that there are different hymn sheets, and that's okay, rather than trying to sing off the same hymn sheet. We talked about diversity before, is that the white cis het male version of diversity is we're going to hire a black trans woman, and we're going to hire an Asian gay guy, and we're going to hire all of these people, and then we're going to ask them to act white. And that's not diversity. That's false diversity. It's like it's disingenuous,
is what it is, because it's very much, I'm ticking this box.
Yes,
I don't care how it gets ticked, but I'm ticking the box. It's one of those things. Like I find that when having conversations about non-het sexualities or non-binary genders, there's a lot of pushback that kind of does sum itself up as, I don't understand, so therefore it is wrong, or it's so difficult for me to understand, and they want me to understand everything at once. But I always try and put that at ease by saying it's okay to not know. It's the correction that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. There's every day there's like a new kind of sexuality term that I have come across, and I haven't heard of it before, and it's okay that I didn't know. The wrong part is me going, I haven't heard of that before, so that's actually fake.
No, I get it, and I think that's another kind of thing that it does link into, is that you do get a lot of people that there's from from what I will describe as our side, and by our side I mean if you represent any form of different sexuality, if you represent any form of mental condition, if you represent a different race, if you represent a different gender, whatever. I know obviously I only tick 2 of those boxes, but from our side, I think there needs to be. I had an expression that basically got me hated on a lot, which is funny, right? Because the expression was not them and us, but all of us, right? And the majority of sensible, reasonable, rational people loved this expression, but people who are on the far side of either side of overly liberal, overly conservative, or for want of a better word, did not like it in the slightest. And that's the whole thing, is that what I call the we, which is the more overly, I don't consider myself overly liberal, but I'm definitely liberal. That side of it, we can be a little bit, right. Again, like you just said, then there's so much to learn. There is so much to learn for people who like half the terms I say on this show. I have to remind myself that the audience I have here and the people I speak to here and the guests I speak to here, we understand most of the same language as each other. Then I'll go and speak to my friends who literally just go and do their 9 to 5, come home, watch a bit of football, and play some Xbox and all the rest of it. They're not involved in these type of discussions. These type of discussions don't come into work. They're not really active on social media, so they're not even aware that these things are going on. And as I said, like I live out in literally probably like one of the whitest towns in the whole freaking world. It's like, and so there's not. I mean, there's more diversity in Liverpool now than there was when I was growing up there, but there's none around here. To the point at which obviously we get the slight passive aggressive stuff about a loner's accent if people talk to us while we're out walking the dog. So like, oh, you're not from around here. Oh yeah, it's like, oh my God, yeah, neither am I. But or my absolute favorite, what do you do for work then? And as it came up before, you know, I've got me a sugar mummy. It's like, you know, she's very high up in the insurance industry. And then you get the whole, well, I thought you'd be out picking the fields. And it's just like, well, it's funny you should say that. That's what I do at the weekends now. She does. When we walk down by the canal, she steals all the blueberry. It's not blackberries. It's not stealing. It's foraging. It's because they're not anyone's property. But I call her forage gump when we do that. But literally brain gone in 46 different directions. Oh yeah. So I think, okay, first of all, the other side needs to do way more to understand our side. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think our side needs a little bit more patience when it comes to accepting the fact that whilst let's say I'm trying to explain what neurodivergence is to someone on that side, at the same time as someone's trying to explain what finsexual is to someone on that side, or at the same time as what someone's trying to explain what asexual is to someone on that side, or at the same time as you know, like the same time someone's trying to explain neo-pronouns to someone on that side at the same time. Do you know what I mean? And the reason I say this, and I'm hoping that if I tie this up neatly in a bow right now, come on, Dave, this is the moment of truth. The reason I say this is because to our side, the, you know, whatever side that is, the diverse side, that's what you call it, to our side, we'd get overwhelmed because we're human, and overwhelm is a human thing. And to anyone on our side, I always say, you know, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. Because when you're told, if you get told that you have to do 10 things, your brain conflates it into, I've got to do all 10 things of this at the same time. Yeah. If you're getting told that you've got to that here's, you know, learn these pronouns, do this, here's, be more sensitive towards like different sexualities, you know, like. That's the Stop Asian Hate movement, all of these movements at the same time, though each one of these things is extremely important. If a person tries to do all of them at the same time, they will fail miserably and they will feel overwhelmed. And the big issue I believe that we have is that whatever variation of I need a better word of this from the our side, but whatever variation of diversity that you personally represent, if a person on the other side is becoming aware of other variations of diversity, but is not yet aware of your version of diversity, or not to the level that you are, which is never going to happen. Like a white person is never going to fully understand what it's like to be black, ever, ever. Like we, you know, and but like they're definitely not going to understand all those things at the same time. So I think that we are getting there. I think that progress is being made, and the word transition comes up a lot when we talk about this, and how about transitions are painful periods. And to me, it's like, I like to kind of applaud someone who's on that other side if they're making an effort in any direction. If let's say if one of my friends makes an effort to understand racism more, but isn't making an effort to understand mental health anymore right now, and mental health is my thing, then I should be glad that they're making the effort to understand racism, and a lot, and hope that when they understand that a little bit more, they might now have the capacity to now maybe learn about mental health, rather than saying, oh, you're learning about mental racism, are you? Well, you need to know about intersectional feminism, and you need to know intersectional everything. Basically, it's like, I suppose the easy way to say this is, I don't expect everyone to be intersectional on the first day. Oh, could have said it in one sentence.
Sure, no, but like we got there. That was fantastic. And the previous bits are essential to get to the point. But like, I do think I can understand the sort of pushback from, to use the term that you're using, our side. In particular, like if I think of trans people, and sometimes the big thing that I hear from people who are just learning about it is like, oh, I've misgendered a person, and they get really angry, and that makes me not want to learn this thing. And I can kind of understand the anger, because I'm sitting here like, yeah, but I guarantee you that it's not the first time that's happened.
Yeah.
Like it's when you're facing something constantly and constantly and constantly, your patience will wear thin. Yeah. Like I'm fully willing to sit here and explain what asexuality is to people, but if I had to do this 10 times a day, by the end of that 4th day, I will be a lot less patient. Even like I tried to be very patient.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember seeing this when regarding racism, and my initial knee-jerk reaction was totally and utterly broiled up in white privilege. But basically, it was one point saying, at some point saying, it was a black creator saying, white people, stop asking us to do your homework for you. Go and research what racism is yourself. And because I am a mental health educator, I was like, I kind of put my whole mental health educator / white person thing on at the time, and was a little bit like, well, can you imagine if I turned around and said, stop? But then I'm actually a mental health educator. I'm not like, that doesn't mean everyone with mental health has to be 100% of the time. And also, and it took me again a long time to realize this, I don't have to be a mental health educator 100% of my day. And any person of color should not have to advocate for racism 100% of their day, should not have to advocate for anti-racism, should I say, should not have to educate people on racism. And it comes down to, again, me not accepting the one simple thing, which is what you just said at that time, is by the time that creator might have been asked that question to explain racism to another white person, it's not the first white person, it's the 50th white person that they've had to do it to. And as a result, because when I said it, I'm like, God, if I'm asking basically, if I want to know what an experience is like to somebody, I want to speak to a person that's had that experience. And me reading about it and going and researching about it, I still think it's not going to give me the right answer. But I'm not I'm not entitled to that question, to that answer from the person that I choose. Like, for example, I admitted to before, the friend of mine who still chooses not to be open about their asexuality. I'm glad that I actually did ask, because my assumption about whether or not they wanted to meet the other person, because they had said to me that they didn't have anyone else to talk to about it. And then I was like, and then I did ask, but actually, if I'm honest, my initial knee-jerk reaction at that point was, oh, these two people should meet, because this one's told me that they don't have anybody to talk to about this. And that's, again, jumping in with the fix. God, such a man thing. There we go. Maybe I am actually a man. But yeah, it is that whole understanding that, someone doesn't have to explain their thing over and over and over again. And sometimes by the time you do, but the big way I like to say it when it comes to pronouns is, And why I like to encourage, because I always have to think about who am I speaking to and whose mind am I trying to change, really. I'm not trying to change the person with different pronouns, right, in mind to say your pronouns should be, whatever. What I'm thinking about, okay, who am I speaking to? I'm speaking to a person that might not understand about the correct use of pronouns and why it's important. The way I say it to them is, okay, it is difficult. It is difficult. We've had someone in the Discord yesterday come in and is using the Z-Zem pronouns, and I've never said those in my life before. This is literally the first time I've said it out loud, and I hope that's pronounced right, because it's an X, X-E, X-E-M, so Z-Zem is that?
As far as I'm aware, yeah.
So I hope I've pronounced that right. And yeah, again, gut reaction was, shit, I hope I don't get that wrong. And the thing is, if you... the more someone is, if it is hard to learn a new pronoun, it is hard to attach, especially if it's somebody that you knew before transition. If it's someone that you've known for a long time, it is hard, especially again, and it's hard to not dead name that person, because you may have called this person their dead name for 10 years by the time it's come to this point. The thing is, once you start using a person's correct pronoun and a person's correct name, it gets easier for you the more you do it. If you continue to use the wrong ones, it gets more and more difficult for the person on the other side. So it's like, the thing is that you've either got the choice of something that's going to get progressively easier for you, that in 2-3 weeks, you may never make a mistake with ever again. Or to a person that within 2-3 weeks, 3 months, 6 years is going to progressively not want you to be part of their life because you don't respect them, or you're actually kind of heightening any gender dysphoria that they might be experiencing by doing that. You are causing a person. Yeah, okay, I get the fact that it's difficult for you, but it will get easier for you. Yeah. It's never going to get easier for the other person if you continue to mispronoun them and misgender them.
Yeah, 100%. And I do think as well, like, my thoughts on it are, and like I will preface this with, like, I'm speaking as a cisgendered person. I use the pronouns that I've used my entire life, so I do not know what it's like, so correct me if I'm wrong. I do think a lot of the time when people will misgender somebody or dead name them, and they'll be like, and they got so angry, so unreasonably angry, I would imagine it was also paired with a dismissive attitude to the mistake that you've made.
Yeah.
I do think for a lot of people, it's fine if I was like, oh, so he was like, sorry, I'm wrong. She was like, the acknowledgement that if you've misgendered somebody, the acknowledgement that you've made the mistake is monumental, I believe. Yeah,
absolutely. Like this weird, very weird, very, very weird, comparison. But when I was just a little boy, when I was about 18 or 19, back in the days when I was in that band that I was that briefly came up before, the singer of that band opened my car door, and I was like, it was my first car, so it was quite precious of him. He opened my car door into a wall, and I was like, and I basically said, I was like, can you be careful, please, or something along those lines. I didn't and because I was challenged, he didn't apologize, and then got annoyed at me about the fact that I'd asked him to be careful. And it's like, that's the thing is, to me, to this day, his reaction to my reaction is more what I'm bothered about than the fact that he actually opened my car door into a wall. It did cause a scratch, But if he'd have basically turned around and said, oh, I'm sorry, I'll be more careful next time, it'd have been forgotten about it within a second. Yeah. Now, I know obviously a car door and someone's pronouns are completely and utterly different, but the thing is, you do remember, you do remember when, when people, when their reaction to your reaction. And it's such an interesting thing when it comes to reactions. We talked about it about 10 months ago. God, everything loses track of time now. But about the idea is there such a thing as an overreaction? And it was an interesting conversation because people tend to think that there's no such thing people tend to think that there's no such thing as an overreaction in themselves, but there is overreactions in other people. And I think all of this comes down to that the context of yourself, but you don't know the context of another person. If you're for want of a better word, overreacting to something, you know everything that's led to that reaction. If you were to, call me a thieving scouser right now, which again, it's something I've had to deal with my entire life, and I don't actually have any bad feelings about it, weirdly. But if you were to do that now, and because I'd been called that my entire life, I wouldn't just be upset with you for calling me it now. I'd be upset of it in the context of I've had to hear this my entire life. This, I'm fed up. Like I don't get upset if people call me crazy or anything like that. Now I've just taken all the power out of those words, even though I am crazy. I'll just tell about, I am mental. I have mental health conditions, so I don't do that now. But when I was 14 and I'd been diagnosed, but I didn't open up to any of my family about it, it used to be a really strong trigger word for me.
Of course,
because it was contextualized in me with have they figured it out? Have they know? But do they know? Like all of my fears come into light,
Yeah.
And it is context is so vitally important in all these things. And a person's I've found that again, like there's been a number of times I've never misgendered a trans person, but I have misgendered non-binary people. And usually, again, it's because for me, it's because when I was first introduced to them, there were different pronouns. And again, absolutely. I've got an anchor in there that basically when I first spoke to this person, they used she her. When I first spoke to this person, he used the word he him, and again, with people who I've known were non-binary from the day I met them, I've never made that mistake. But it's one of those things that I will correct myself on it. And if the person said, "Oh, you've just mispronounced me," my response wouldn't be "get over it." My response would be, "I'm sorry about that," and correct myself. And I think again, I've never, because that's happened, I have never come across an angry person in that situation. And that might just mean, but again, that expression that we use all the time, everybody is fighting a battle, nothing about, be kind always, just applies to like everybody. So when someone does react, that so-called overreaction isn't necessarily just to what you're doing right now. It's down to thingy. To be fair, I never correct you if you always correct yourself. It was what Cass has put, because Cass is one of the people that I've with the I was going to say the thing is with Cass is that I knew Cass as Cass didn't tell me their pronouns straight away, and was essentially, it was something that I kind of picked up on, the fact that how did I pick up on it, Cass? Remind me. I picked up on it. And then there's been a bunch of mistakes with Cass, and the other person I spoke, I don't know if they're listening, has been Cristiano, because I've known Cristiano for like 2 or 3 years, and Cristiano came out as non-binary this year, and I have used he him pronouns for them a couple of times, and again corrected myself because it's just.
But like that's the important thing. It's the mistake is not the problem. It's the doubling down on it. It's because I don't mean to make myself sound like this like cis champion, but like there's been conversations that I've had on behalf of people that were like, a lot of people have problems. A lot of older people in particular have problems with using they them pronouns in a singular way. Yeah. Even though it's been used, if I was talking about a person and I didn't know who they were, I would use they constantly.
Yeah. Someone's left their car on my drive.
Yeah. Like it happens all the time. But like these people,
it must be a woman though, because women are bad drivers. All X or Y. Someone's going to clip that and take it out of context.
But yeah, so like what annoyed me was not the lack of understanding on like they them can be a singular pronoun. It was after I had explained it to them, they were like, no, you're wrong there. It just does not make sense to me. And I'm like, that's kind of the problem. It's not making sense to you, but it does make sense. The failure is within you, and if you can just acknowledge that, then that's the battle is over,
Yeah. I mean, if he says that person, okay, if you've got a taxi coming, I hope they get here soon. It's like, again, you don't know whether the taxi driver is male or female, so you use they. It's used as a singular pronoun all the time. Two things. One, I need to wrap up in like very, very shortly, and two, I need to go for a wee. This is this has been phenomenal. I'm glad I didn't stop. I'm glad I didn't hit end record for the podcast bit when we finished the podcast bit, because I think the actual second hours end up in some very, very, very interesting places. So thank you so much for being so awesome and generous with your time. Cass, can we have a shout out for TH It Up Gaming, please? And so people can follow over there. And
thank you so much.
And again, if you want the kind of this kind of in-depth level of conversation from Dean, I think Alan's, if you're so doing it, is it just Man Up Alan now on his?
Just Man Up Alan, yeah. Is it Al or Alan?
No, I don't know. I'll find it.
Sure, yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add before we bring this to a close and I go and have the most needed wee of my life, I think?
Thanks for having me on. I really do appreciate seeing me as valuable enough to have on. It was fantastic. Thank you so
much. Well, yeah, you're absolutely welcome. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to talk to you. And I've really enjoyed it. I think even though weirdly in the second hour I was having to check in with chat more, the second hour was a lot more lost in than the first hour as well. I was more wrapped up in wanting to ask specific questions in the first hour and wanting to have it all neatly packaged up because the podcast listeners need that. I hope to cut that bit, Dave. Don't let the podcast listeners know that they need that. But I was more concerned about that, and then in the second hour, we've just obviously completely freestyled it, and it was just a great conversation that people were gegging in on.
Absolutely, I loved it. I had a fantastic time.
It's been great. Right, I'm going to disappear for a minute, everybody, and when I return, we'll do the mental health check-in. See how everyone is at the end of the stream. I'll try and catch up with a few messages, but I'm definitely not going to get through all of the ones that have come through there. There's no lucky. Cass has put a thing through. The Lucky Submarine has ended. It ended last month. It was there was for reasons, but most of them being that it costs me more to be on Twitch than I was making on Twitch, so I had to kind of stop it because remember, I'm the spongy one who has to justify his own income every now and then. But right, Dean, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I will catch you soon.
Absolutely. Everybody, thank you very much.
Be right back.